G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic Wednesday and a fantastic midweek. Now, as always, we have a lot to go over. We're going to look at the maps, but importantly, a couple of geolocations, as well as reports we're getting from Ukraine about where Russia is pushing a mass of its forces at the moment to try and make a fist and push through defensive lines and start an offensive. So we'll talk at length about that, and we'll also have a look over some movements over the past few weeks and where things have gone, what could be happening. We need to talk about Putin's visit to North Korea and where some areas actually may be downplayed in that and why this is important for the story of this war. We'll also then look at some new weapon systems and some weapon systems promised that are delayed that Ukraine is really not happy about. Those are the F-16s. We'll talk a bit more at length in this. But the big news of the day, but outside of this conflict, but I'll tell you why it's relevant, is that Israel have plans for an offensive into Lebanon against a group there starting with H. It's in the north of Israel. I can't say that word on this website. Now, I am seeing the possibility of me going back and reporting on the ground, but the relevance and why it relates to this war I see as twofold. Firstly, the H in the north are significantly more powerful than the H in the south. Now, why is this relevant for this war? Well, we know that there is a worldwide air defense shortage. Everyone wants air defense, especially Ukraine. Now, the air defense, if that is massively increasingly needed in Israel, we may then see a limit on Ukraine's supply. Now, secondly, and maybe more importantly for the story overall of the war, is this expansion of war from Israel into the north, and then the current American administration in an election year and the unpopularity of that could have a huge effect as well. Legends, you may have noticed that I'm looking extra sharp recently, and if you've been following me for a while, you know that my beard can get out of control. And well, this isn't just luck that I'm looking a lot better. It is, of course, helped by today's video sponsor and a brand that has helped over 10 million men worldwide. Manscaped and their new Beard Hedge trimmer. And this thing is fantastic. And you've actually probably seen in some of my videos, I'm adjusting the length of my beard to see what looks good and what doesn't. And my girlfriend gives me a fair bit of compliment on whether it looks good or bad. She's a harsh critic, but on the trimmer, you can just zoom in and out and then let it grow and see what you like. And that is actually fantastic. And looking after a luscious beard, it's not easy and it takes time, but especially in the Pro Kit, you get everything that you will need. And I'm still discovering more and more about this. You get beard oil, you'll get beard shampoo, you'll get beard conditioner and beard balm, and especially in the Pro Kit, you'll also get a beard brush, a beard comb, and scissors, all of which I could probably use a little bit more. But I'd like to thank Manscaped for sponsoring this video. And go to manscaped.com today and get 20% off and free shipping when you use my code WILLYOAM at checkout. And that's 20% off plus international free shipping with the code WILLYOAM. I live in Australia, you live outside of the US. We know shipping absolutely kills it. So if you use that code at manscaped.com, you get 20% off and it'll get sent to you for free. Growing a magnificent beard is possible thanks to the help to the Manscaped Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Thank you, Manscaped, for sponsoring this video. I had a contact of mine in Ukraine reach out to me in response last night, and when I said that Russia is currently in a bit of a media blackout, we're not getting much out. And he actually filled me in that, well, some areas in Ukraine are also now in media blackout spots too. So it will be interesting to wait and see what then happens. Now, for these blackouts, both Ukrainian and Russian, these are for a few reasons. Either trying to hide preparation for next movements and stages of defense or for an attack, or it can be to avert eyes from a situation that is detrimental to the war effort within the informational space. This is one of the things we're learning with a war like this and being online, is how the informational space can affect morale on the front line. It can affect movements, geolocations, all of this. And an example of this, if you see strikes on an important weapon system, you'll then get 8 videos, 4 different angles. But if there's losing positions, losing an important system on your side, you'll get no footage coming from there. So it's something just to keep in mind as we go forward reporting through this war and how influential that informational space is. But let's then have a look at the maps and some important areas. So of course, here is Ukraine in the center of your screen. Up here is the capital Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014, and these green and the blue, but the blue is within 2 weeks, areas of which Russia has been and has either been pushed out by Ukraine or has withdrawn, some cases vice versa, depending on then the informational space. But the first area I want to look is the reports we're getting between Luhansk Oblast and then the Kharkiv Oblast here about Russian offensives then towards Borova. Now, important thing about Borova is then this waterway here, what will act as a natural barrier, as a bit of a natural defensive line if Russia was able to get into here, but also then splitting then the north and south areas and the supply routes and roads that will come out of somewhere like Borova with, of course, these crossings. And you can see the road running to the south, the road running to the north. These are all things you then need to look at. Now, this has come out from the 3rd Assault Battalion Azov, as well as then Deep State. So Deep State has released with it then this map here as well. Now, we'll line this up more and we'll show you what, but they're talking about these 3 stages of a Russian push out to then Borova. So I will leave, I'll close that. I'll show you that maybe a little bit later on, but as we read through this, you'll be able to line up where some of these areas are. The enemy built up a shock fist to attack Borova on the section of here and here. So we're talking these 2 areas across here. The Russians built up 10,000 personnel and about 450 AT missiles, including 200 artillery systems. The goal is obvious, an attempt to repeat last year's attack on Borova. Against the enemy, the long defensive line in the direction is currently being held. However, the forces remain disproportionate. The occupiers are outnumbered, use additional units, and conduct intensive assaults along the entire offensive line. Russia deployed forces from the 20th Army in the form of 3 and 144 divisions, which are represented by 236 artillery brigades, 11 regiments, 7 motorised rifle, 2 tank, 2 artillery. In addition, mercenaries from irregular army units were involved. Among them, it is known the presence of Storm V, Black Mamba, Vixix, this Patriot, Bars 14, arrived to maintain order. Now, one thing about mercenaries and irregular army units being involved, this is something we've seen Russia actually doing a little bit, and we actually have done very similar to this with special forces and more trained guys into other units then around the world as well. So you get these more experienced, better guys to be like on the ground command, control, and training of units that are lesser trained. Many units did that, say, through Afghanistan. And that's what I believe that Russia is doing here. And my friends have told me that some of these irregular units or mercenary units are doing within regular Russian infantry units. For the past 3 weeks, the enemy has been conducting preparatory measures in the form of probing for weak points in the defense of the armed forces. So probing in where is weak, where can we push, as well as massive artillery. Russia wants maneuver under massive artillery. That is within doctrine as far back as you can have a look. There are continuous assaults on the positions of 3 separate assault brigades. The enemy is losing personnel, but 200 to 400 freshly mobilised soldiers arrive every week. This is enough for both replenishment and expansion of the group. So far, the tactic of meat assaults has not yet yielded significant results, only due to the fact that there is a strong brigade in the area, but we emphasise that forces are far from equal. According to the available information, the enemy plans to repeat last year's strategy with an exit first to this line in here. So an exit from what we're looking at along this first line, and that's that first bubble you can see. Based on the situation, it is important not to repeat last year's mistakes, as the level of military engagement of the Russians has somewhat increased. The presence of a significant number of mercenaries, who are mainly used for assault rather than defensive action, also causes concern. We'll remind you, last year, only the reinforcement by these units saved the front from failure. We attach an image of approximate configuration of enemy forces in this direction as of now. Now, I wish this photograph was actually in better quality so we'd get a better idea of what is happening, but the 3 stages of an attack to push through to then Borova, and where then these units are stacking up for a further push through. And then we have this from the telegram of the 3rd Assault Brigade official. The enemy is intensifying attacks to reach the borders of Luhansk region. The front line of the 3rd Assault Division in Kharkiv Oblast, bordering Luhansk Oblast, is today one of the most intense areas of the enemy offensives. The immediate task of the occupiers is to get to this line we spoke about and the subsequent capture of Borova against units of the 3rd Brigade, the 114th Division and the 20th Army of the Russian Federation. The enemy is advancing with tank regiments, attracting a significant amount of artillery and additional detachments from the PKV, Special Forces, using FPVs, anti-aircraft missiles, and interestingly in here they say as well, chemical weapons. And then they speak about the losses of the Russian forces here being over then 1,000. The rapid liquidation is compensated by the replenishment of manpower in the amount of 250 to 400 soldiers of the Soviet Union of the Russian Federation every week. So heading into then replace then these numbers. So this is very interesting to also look at on the ground. We will definitely then keep our eyes on. So let's just come up from north of here and then we'll look around this Vovchansk front. Now, something that is shown on this map today is a further Russian expansion then out to the east. This is very interesting to see. We do know that when this first happened, Syriac did show a hell of a lot more ground on the eastern side of this than these maps did. Maybe this is catching up or maybe this is new advancement. We are unsure, but we still see this disconnect between Russian units here. Now, I've spoken to a few guys about this and it is questionable what exactly is actually happening here. Is it completely surrounded and cut off? Well, there are claims of this, but with this 200 meters between here as well, then we aren't 100% sure exactly what is actually happening in here. I know it likes to fit narratives and stuff, but even guys on the ground I'm talking to are saying it's not really believing that there's 400 guys stuck in here, because logistically alone, how would that maintain now for the number of days that it's been holding there? But we do have video, speaking of this exact area, of a Ukrainian ATGM against this building. So this is right in this same part here. So let's have a look at this footage. There's something else interesting in this. So you'll see ATGM strike across here, and then the video comes back and shows where then the Ukrainian ATGM system is. So just bear in mind this built up like treed area here, and where that then has fired, and these guys eating, I'm guessing, some salo and cheese and whatever else. Now, again, the treat areas, so we're talking somewhere down in here. This is what we spoke about. The problem of this crossing of the Vovcha is you've got a lot of open ground between the urban area to urban area, across then a difficult crossing, because of course you're going across a bloody river. Any unit is going to have to go across open ground, and then the Vovcha as well. So that is just interesting, an area to then actually have a look at. Now we'll just come to the east of here around the Sinkivka front. There, have a look at Yahidny in here, and I just want to have a quick look at some of the maps that we have updated from Syriac then in this area. So we're just calling this then the northern corner. So you can see here around this Sinkivka front, and then this is down sort of the Yahidny Kislivka. So let's have a look just in here, because these look significantly different from what we are then seeing. So some areas just to the south of Kislivka look very similar if we take where this road comes out. But then if we look just to the north of here, there are areas showing significantly more Russian control than Ukrainian control then on Syriac's map. Then just to the north a little bit more of here around Sinkivka, this is still looking fairly similar. We know that this area in here, there's a hell of a lot of fighting. Russia has been trying to push hard on here for a while without that much success. So this is still an area of which, of course, to keep an eye, especially because this is just to the north of Borova as well. And we have, of course, the center in here of this is then, of course, Kupiansk and Izium as well. Areas of which Russia was then pushed out of in that end of 22 then offensive. So another area I want to go down, we just have a look then into the south of occupied territory. And this is somewhere where I just don't know what's going on. So this Krinky front where we see, of course, this grey zone in here. Now, some maps show this as green or blue or whatever. Some say then that Ukraine has actually fully withdrawn. They're in some islands, but they've then withdrawn back across the right side of the Dnipro. Again, we don't know. Crossing any waterway is incredibly difficult and should be avoided at any costs in wartime infantry armoured assaults, especially with the amount of ISR assets. But then we do get just a little bit of geolocated footage here, and depending on the map, this could be interesting or not, of a lone Russian soldier near this like blown out bridge thing here, getting targeted by Ukrainian drones. Now, where this is just up from to the west of Krinky, so just about here. What shows red on this map, but other maps like this one, for example, show it then as grey zone. So exactly what's going on around the Krinky front, I'll be the first one to say then I don't really know. Now, Before we go anywhere else, I just want to have a look at what other changes are actually then shown on this map today. As this one, near Toretsk, this is a very interesting one. So we see, of course, this purple, this has been Russian occupied for now 10 years. But we need to say as well that anything around this has then been fortified for that also 10 years. So any movement out of here or into here is very important. Now, I know this is just out of then red, but again, it's only then maybe a kilometre away. We know defensive works sit a while away. So there has been a Russian push down here looking like they're trying to head into Toretsk. And as well, we see just to the south of here, then Russia closing up some territory in here, of course, then making this grey zone an expansion as well. So this front is moving around this New York, Toretsk. It is definitely worth keeping an eye on here, as this is just then above Avdiivka. And this front in here has held for a long time, hasn't moved much. But of course, this is what separates Avdiivka and then Bakhmut in this section. So very, very important area to keep an eye on and see then what will occur down on this front line. So let's have a look up and down the maps. Let's see what has then changed. So we do have Syriac. He's giving us some updates of what has happened over the past few weeks. And he has his update then of Avdiivka here. I'm not going to read this out. You can look it on the Telegram, but just showing on what days and what expansion then took place in other areas. So this is sort of the Osheretny front. This is more in Solovov and then Urmansky as well. So you see then this reservoir here and the filling out of this area from between Urmansk, Novoporovsky, areas like this. So it is interesting, shows, of course, a lot more close up through these gaps, but it'll become more obvious once things start moving or things then stop moving around here. So then we'll look down, of course, just Netelyovo, Nevelsky front, where we have seen some changes. And to my eye, these maps are actually showing very, very similar. We did see Deep State show this move into Nevelsky a few days ago, as well as just some movement out around the reservoir from Netelyovo. Nothing too majorly different here. Now, speaking in this area, we do have a Ukrainian Noel Reports map update then today. So we look at then Urmansky, Semenivka, that he does show some movement and an update on his map just between Novopokrovsky and, of course, then Urmansk as well here. So the Russians are moving daily, closing up these areas. Now, what I'll speak of is, again, the basics of attritional warfare, that you attack on many fronts, many little movements on many different fronts to move your enemy around. But if you're on the opposing side of that, you step back to defense, step back, and delay and have the cost for them very high as well. That's how attritional warfare is done. Who is doing that better at the moment? Well, I'll leave it up to you. But I would say my personal opinion on the attritional front is Russia have the initiative on that because of the lack of defensive works and the movements we have seen in some very large steps, and just numerical how many soldiers Russia has to push in separate areas or open up new fronts. And if this Barova front did open, that would then throw a huge spanner in the works if there was more success there and redeployment of further soldiers. So we're down in Avdiivka. We're just going to move just to the north a little bit, of course, Bakhmut here. Now, no changes around Chasiv Yar here, although I did have someone on the ground tell me that, no, this is moving. We're just not really seeing it that much yet. So this is then the Syriac maps update in this front, and this is over the past week or so that he's been away. Some areas to look at is where Russia has made ground in the center of Chasiv Yar, also out from Boronivka, but how Ukraine has pushed back in from Kalininivka as well here. Now, this, I believe, actually was never really shown on this map here, but we did have, I think Noel Reports map showed this push back in here. So that's where the movements are and the flexible front line that is happening then around this front. But we'll just come to the north of here further. Of course, this is just to the south of Seversk, where we have seen some movements on this map, and we do have Syriac showing movements around then Rozdelivka. So, of course, this down here, this is Vesely, this is Rozdelivka, and this pushing and closing up on this area around then the Seversk front. This isn't the easiest to see, but see where this rail line has this like kink in it. We're talking around this same area of the grey zone here as well. We're not done yet here. We're going to push just to the north, where we saw yesterday Ukraine make this, actually no, sorry, 2 days ago in the Kremna forest, we saw this, but then Syriac around Belahorivka as well. He's saying that the Russians have got then the entirety of this quarry here, what gives high ground in here, especially for weapons and dead ground, as well as areas in the center of Berezivka. Again, we wait for more confirmations on exactly what is happening here. We need to move further north, just a little bit, pick up from here, come down to Terni, and Syriac then shows this. So this has been represented across these maps where Ukraine made ground back in just on this southern sort of prong, so back down in here, and as well has made some ground on like the northern prong along here too. Remembering this is still very close then to Terni, only a kilometre, and as well we talk about where reservoirs will have then a natural line of defence in here too. So interesting movements, that are happening up and down the front, but also an idea of what is happening over the past few weeks and by Syriac's perspective there. Now, of course, Putin is in North Korea, in Pyongyang. Now, yes, North Korea, outside of the media coming out from the controlled state, it is a hellscape. But I think people need to understand some things about North Korea and the importance of it, not just look at the GDP and look at how people live and go, no concern here. Let's look at where North Korea is. Of course, as North Korea down here sits directly between China and Russia down here. This is an important area. They've got a lot of people that can be controlled. And as well, I think people forget just how much artillery North Korea have, and that then gets forgotten. And how much cheap, free labour, how much artillery can be made, and how much stores then they have left over. Now, the quality of this artillery may be questionable, not denying that, but we're seeing in this attritional war, quantity is beating quality. If the quality is so few and so expensive, it's not making its way to the front line, the quantity is beating that. Remember, North Korea has delivered Russia, according to Seoul, somewhere between 4 and 6 million shells. That's, depending on the numbers, 6 to 8 times what the EU has managed last year. Shell for shell, no, it's not comparable. But when you're talking those sheer numbers and there's an ammunition shortage on the Ukrainian side, well, you can get an idea of this. So we have just some photographs here. I'll show you just the massive amounts of artillery that North Korea then has. We speak a lot about shells, but North Korea also has a lot of MLRS rocket-based artillery systems as well. Now, what is happening here? Putin also pledged his unwavering support to North Korea in a letter published in the newspaper controlled by North Korea's ruling Workers' Party. He vowed to support North Korea's efforts to defend its interests despite what he called US pressure, blackmail, and military threats. We'll develop alternative mechanisms of trade and mutual settlements that are not controlled by the West and jointly resist illegitimate unilateral sanctions. This is something that's becoming more obvious about sanctions. If countries just sign in their own deals and don't adhere to sanctions from the West and just trade between them, the sanctions then have no effect between just that trade. And this is the danger of what we're seeing with China as well. Putin's letter was published ahead of its planned 2-day visit to North Korea, which will be the first time he has visited the country in 24 years. Now, we do have then this sign coming out today from the President of the Russian Federation to accept the proposal of Russian Foreign Affairs agreed upon the federal government, bodies and organizations sign a comprehensive strategic partnership between the Russian Federation and the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. Allow Russian Foreign Ministry during negotiations and the signing of said agreement made changes to its draft are not of fundamental nature. Consider it expedient to sign the agreement, provided the order by the highest level. We don't yet know exactly what was in this, and as well, like we've spoken about, there's always a threat here because we don't know what has headed back to North Korea to what they have asked for in exchange for the weapon systems, the dumb weapon systems that they're providing to Russia. And what effect can this have on the artillery? Well, this can just give a buffer to Russian industry to catch up to losses in that replacement rate. Very similar to the break that the Wagner PMC taking over offensive operations in the east then gave the Russian regular forces to build up and sustain losses, yes, but somewhere else outside of the regular. Same with, say, the industry. The artillery is, yes, being used, but it's not then on Russia's industrial base that it's using North Korea. It can give then a boost for that industry then to catch up. So we know that the F-16s they have seemed to be delayed. We don't know exactly what the problem is. We had messaging out of the Baltics saying any week now, any month, this month, and that was now well past those timeframes given. And we have seen Ukraine speak out, and they're not very happy about this. So Alexandra Utsanova, head of Kiev's Arms and Munitions Commission, says a political decision by Washington is damaging operations against Russia. The United States is making excuses over its failure to train sufficient numbers of F-16 pilots, the head of Ukraine's Special Parliamentary Commission on Arms and Munitions claimed. The holdup means Ukraine will probably have only 20 pilots who have been fully trained. Remember, to have a full fleet of the F-16s is 20 planes, but you need 40 pilots. She said, so far, we're going to have fewer trained pilots than fighter jets. Belgium, Denmark, Netherlands, Norway have pledged to transfer more than 60 F-16s to Ukraine, so you need 120 pilots to be fully complete on that. The first jets are expected to arrive late this year, but it is unclear when they begin combat missions. Utsanova said that so far only 8 Ukrainian pilots were being trained in Tucson. Of course, there are other areas training F-16 pilots, but in America that only 8 are there currently being trained. Now, a friend of mine who's an engineer in the Air Force has spoken a bit about aircraft, particularly fighter aircraft. He said, when you're assessing any numbers, either Russian, Ukrainian, American, Australian, whatever, however many planes you've got, just divide it by half. That will be the amount that can actually get up in the air on any given day. Just the amount of maintenance, the problems, pilots, all of this of actually up in the air. Yes, you've got that many planes on Su-34s or Su-27s or F-16s, whatever, but the amount that are actually could go up in the air on a mission at that point, he always said his rule of thumb is divided by half. Again, these are like a Formula One car, not a Toyota Corolla. The Times reported it's a political decision by Washington is damaging operations against Russia. The third training program in Romania has not yet begun. Washington told Kyiv that other countries were ahead of Ukrainian pilots in the queue for training places, and it could not violate its obligations to them. So other countries were, we're taking them to train them, and ahead of Tucson that are training the pilots, where Utsanova has said that only 8 are actually being trained. And the US Defense Department spokesman also claimed that Ukrainian pilots are having a difficulty with their English language skills and the flight program, saying the progress of training F-16s is quite meager. Remember, everything is in English in the cockpit and, of course, an incredibly complex system. Utsanova called such claims ridiculous, adding that these are not arguments, they're excuses, and they keep coming with them again and again. Now, I actually see both sides of this. Now, so I get the monkey part of my brain says, don't bite the hands that feed you. But the other part of my brain says, yeah, but you've got Biden at these international conferences saying anything you need, we will give it to you. We stand with you till the end. And America, which we know can train a lot more pilots than this, has a lot more aircraft than this, are not really keeping up what they say. What America says at things versus what we see on the ground is significantly different. The messaging from the White House, the situation given, 30 tanks, bloody 8 pilots being trained. That is different. I can see why people get bloody pissed off in that. Now, Ukraine had drone strikes overnight in Rostov as well, with successful hits on then oil facilities here. So we can see at least 2 of these then large tanks have been taken out. That is from Brady Afric here, and then we'll get another photograph of then this burning. This is well over 100 kilometers then behind the line of these drone strikes as well. And we've also seen that any good weapons get copied by the other side. So things like the Caesar, we see Russia have analogues of that, and that is sort of how we can confirm if something's good, because we are then seeing that Ukraine has made an analogue of the Russian Lancet named Mace. You can see by the cross wings, very you can just see that it's very similar things. And I've even heard that the cardboard drone was being copied by Russia as well as Ukraine as well. So that is just an interesting bit and piece to give there. But legends, let me know what you think about what's happening. Will we see opening up of fronts? What's going to change? When will we see F-16s? Anyway, have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.